Good evening and welcome to the People's School for Marxist-Leninist Studies. Today is March 25th, 2025, and today our class will be on Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, the Rebel Girl. So, a few things before we begin. The People's School of Marxist-Leninist Studies is a Party of Communist USA sponsored and initiated school, but we are not a party school, so this does allow us to have a wide range of topics and discussions. As well, during our discussion and question rounds, if you would like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function. Please feel free to pass your question along to one of our moderators and we'll answer it on screen. So today we'll be going over Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. We'll start with her early life as the daughter of immigrants and revolutionists, also as a socialist and industrial workers of the world, IWW agitator, the founding and involvement with the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, her involvement in the Irish Republican movements, and her prison years. And our first section will be on daughters of immigrants and revolutionists, socialist and IWW agitator. Comrade, you have the floor.
Thank you. Daughter of immigrants and revolutionists. All right. Elizabeth Gurley Flynn was born in 1890 in Concord, New Hampshire. Her family were early Irish immigrants to America, with her grandfather arriving sometime in the 1840s, who worked in lumber camps, building railroads, and in the granite quarries, among other dangerous and difficult jobs. Her parents, Thomas Flynn and Annie Gurley, along with her brother, Thomas Gurley Flynn, and her two sisters, Lucy Sabina Flynn and Anna Catherine Flynn, were forced to travel the country in their earliest years as their father struggled to find steady work. Elizabeth Gurley's Flynn family were conditioned to accept socialist thinking long before these are in quotes. To accept socialist thinking long before we came in contact with socialism as an organized movement. My father had voted for Eugene V. Debs as a Socialist Party candidate for president in 1900. In Harlem, New York, and in 1906, her family were attending meetings at the Harlem Socialist Club, where she gave her first speech at the age of 16 to a gathering extremely popular with radicals of all descriptions, and it was called the Unity Congregation. In that same summer, she began speaking in the streets of Harlem at mass meetings, which eventually resulted in her first arrest with her father and several others for speaking without a permit and blocking traffic in the heart of the theatrical district. And a quote from Elizabeth: I had begun to feel very strongly that in a rich and fertile country like ours, there was no excuse for poverty, unemployment, child labor, and long strikes. Shortly after joining the IWW in 1906, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn participated in her first strike action with the tube mill workers of Bridgeport, Connecticut, where she participated in strike committee meetings, mass picketing, and daily meetings in 2 languages. In 1907, at the age of 17, she was elected delegate of her IWW local to the IWW convention in Chicago. Her family and friends were hesitant about letting her go, but she was determined. The local had no funds, but the Unity Club were able to raise the $18 fare for her to travel by coach. Following her first cross-country trip as an IWW organizer, she would continue to travel the nation, giving particularly inflammatory speeches at socialist and IWW branches and on the streets about the local labor issues and the workers' grievances. For this activity, she was arrested numerous times and devoted a large amount of her focus towards defending those unjustly arrested for their involvement in labor organizing. During this time, she also married her husband, Jack A. Jones, an ore miner, and an IWW local organizer. She had a miscarriage and gave birth to her only son, Fred Flynn, on May 19th, 1910. And another quote from Elizabeth. How I got by the strict qualification that one must be an actual wage worker, I cannot recall. Possible it was due to my extreme youth and the fact that all the work I did was for the movement, sometimes paid for and often not. Okay. Throughout the years, 1912 to 1916, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn was involved in several of the largest strikes in American history until that time. The first of these being the Lawrence Textile Strike of 1912, which we have talked about, and where she helped lead the strike alongside Big Bill Haywood, holding special meetings for women and struggling against the old world attitude of the men, who voiced considerable opposition to women going to meetings and marching on the picket lines. She was then called to Paterson, New Jersey, the silk weaving center of America, where she found herself involved at once in a major battle of the class struggle of 1913, a long, hard, and brutal strike. She and her comrades were attacked by the city authorities with vicious fury as outside agitators and ordered to leave town. They were then arrested at their first appearance at a mass meeting. After making bail, she continued agitating for the striking workers and was involved in the defense of convicted strikers Quinlan and Boyd, even following the resolution of the strike. Over the next few years, in the lead up to World War I, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn was kept busy by her organizing for the IWW and was frequently called to locations across the country engaged in labor struggles and the fight for free speech. She also continued to participate actively in the defense of innocent strikers and labor leaders who were being persecuted by the state. And this is the lead up to World War I and the founding of the ACLU.
Thank you, comrade. With that, we will break for our first round of discussion and questions. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function. We will get to you in the order they go up.
Yeah, just a quick note. That Patterson strike was a major struggle. And they didn't just kick the organizers out of Patterson. There was no strike actions allowed within the city limits of Patterson. So at that time, what ended up happening was the next town over called Haladon. There was a socialist mayor, and they were allowed to congregate there and hold their rallies there. And so the base of the strike ended up being what is now known as the Botto House. What was known as the Botto House was for the Botto family, and that is now the American Labor Museum. And our Mayor Soglu has a very good relationship with the Labor Museum, and it's a major landmark, and it's a shrine in labor history. So if anybody's ever in the New York City, New Jersey area, please come. We go out there. We're going to be holding events there later this year. We go there every year for the Labor Day parade. It is a great place and hollow ground for labor. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade. Secretary Emeritus Angelo, you have the floor. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, all my years in the communist movement, I never really knew too much about Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. I knew she was a great speaker and very important to the communist movement, but I didn't know personally. I didn't know she was a mother and wife. I didn't know that. Interesting, the human elements I didn't know. Also, I didn't know that she came from a family that was politically left. According to what we said, her father voted for Debs. So I didn't know that either. So it's interesting that she didn't fall far from the tree of her parents. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade Angelo.
My question was, how do local laws affect that area of a certain state or the states?
You're talking in terms of the strikes, right? Or in
Yes.
terms of labor, like what was the attitude?
The attitude towards the strikes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, among the masses, among the workers, was a very strong in support of the striking workers, of course, in of the among the bourgeoisie, among the ruling class, not so much. And you saw and there was the pushback there. Um, that strike specifically, I don't believe the workers ended up winning. There was definitely a lot of repression from the top, but I like we like to say, there's never a failed strike. There's only setbacks, never failures, and eventually everything leads to the ultimate victory in the end. So there was definitely support among the rank and file. When if you look and you can find videos, you can find pictures of the uh, workers congregating outside the bottle house, and there was thousands of workers in the streets. And they would hold I don't remember if it was Sunday or Saturday meetings, and they would thousands in the streets. So it's just amazing the difference between one town over being so accepting of these workers and the repression they faced in the city limits of Patterson itself.
Thank you, Comrade.
A lot of the places that she traveled to in order to speak, especially out west and in like Chicago and around the East Coast, there were a lot of times that she would get up to speak after speaking after other people, and then she would get arrested, and then they would pass laws in the local area where you couldn't like speak on the streets anymore and things like that, and she would get arrested again and again and again. So they would try and like pass laws and things like make it really hard for them to organize and speak and do everything they were doing. So it's just crazy times.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is rhetorical, but it's shocking to me about like, especially how much the world knows about America and its free speech, how much they try to suppress and like everyone's mentioning, not let you be able to speak in public. It's quite shocking. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, laws for thee, not for me. All right. If there are no other hands, we will continue with the presentation. So our second section will be her involvement with the ACLU and the Irish Republican movements. And Comrade Andrea, I believe this is your section. You have the floor.
Yep, thank you. So her involvement with the ACLU, and I tried to grab the most impactful points and put them in. There was a lot to read through. So she was a founding member of the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, in 1920. Flynn played a leading role in the campaign against the convictions of Sacco and Vanzetti. Flynn was particularly concerned with the women's rights, supporting birth control and women's suffrage. Flynn also criticized the leadership of the trade unions for being male-dominated and not reflecting the needs of women. Though Flynn was poor in health most of her time in Portland, she was an active and vocal supporter of the 1934 West Coast Longshore Strike. Involvement with the ACLU Part 2. In 1939, Flynn was re-elected to the ACLU board. However, when Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin signed the Non-Aggression Pact in 1939, the ACLU expelled all Communist Party members from its ranks in 1940, including Flynn. Flynn alone refused and defended her position, refused a hearing, and she was ultimately expelled. In 1976, they repudiated their ouster on grounds that it was inconsistent with their basic principles. And on the left is a picture of when the ACLU betrayed Elizabeth Gurley Flynn and left. Involvement with the ACLU continued. The Communist Party was the largest at this time in its U.S. history, having doubled its membership between 1936 and 1938 to just over 80,000 people. Having come from a loose anarcho-syndicalist movement, Flynn was unaccustomed to and uncomfortable with party discipline and doctrinal shifts often directed from Moscow. Involvement in the Irish Republican movement. Now, there wasn't much I found out about her actions during this time specifically, so the best I could do was point out some notes about the strike itself. So the strike against the Dublin Tramway Company was precipitated by the discharge of 200 men for membership in the Irish Transport Workers Union. The union responded by a general strike demanding the reinstatement of their fellow workers. Discrimination was a last resort after all other means of smashing the union had failed. William Murphy, president of the company, is one of the biggest, or was one of the biggest capitalists in Ireland. Posing as an Irish patriot, he nevertheless accepted a knighthood from the English king. The strike produced intense police persecution. The police rushed to disperse the cheering crowds, and a wild fight followed. Men and women were beaten and trampled on. Blood dyed the streets. 500 were so badly hurt that they received hospital treatment. One man was mortally wounded and has since died, and the other man being killed outright.
Thank you, Comrade Andrea. We'll break for another discussion round. One thing I had a question was in this section was, so the photo that we had shown of Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, so that's her in the middle right there on the first row, and I recognize Big Bill Haywood right here. Who were the other people in the photo?
It did not give any indication who the others were, but the headline under the picture was the betrayal. It mentioned the betrayal. And we do know that Big Bill Haywood was one of the people that was involved. That's all that I am aware of.
Okay. Yeah, because I think Bill Haywood, he got his conviction in 1922, but fled to the Soviet Union. So I'm wondering when that photo was taken.
Yes, what year was the Dublin transport strike?
What year was that, Andrea?
It was either 1918 or 1919, I believe.
Okay. And she supported it. It doesn't mention what she had to do with it.
Yeah, so most of what I written was actually an article written by her. Let me just get it up here. Yeah, so as for the strike, it was actually the info was gathered from an article Elizabeth wrote herself, volume 4, number 37, September 20th, 1913. So this is her own words, and I just got a few excerpts from it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, because going around that timeline, I think that's pretty close to when the fight for Irish independence in the 20s would start happening, or very near that. Comrade Angelo, you have the floor.
I'd like to know if anybody knows about this, that there were problems between Elizabeth Gurley Flynn and Big Bill Haywood on a personal level. And it stemmed from his position in the ACLU in endorsing expelling her. Does anybody hear anything about this?
Well, it wasn't the ACLU, it was IWW.
Okay.
And, we did, we had a discussion about this a couple weeks ago where it was, we couldn't find too much information surrounding why she was expelled. She took a plea deal, after, what was it, the Lawrence strike.
It was another strike after Lawrence where she took a plea deal, or she encouraged some of the people that they were fighting for on behalf to take a plea deal. And then Haywood was like, no, they should have kept to their principles and gone to jail.
Right. Yeah, it's something that I'd like to find out more information myself. Why was this plea deal so controversial? But, for now, we don't have that information.
Thank you.
But I know I forget if it was her biography or later, she did mention about Big Bill being buried in Moscow. So I think probably by the end of his life, she didn't have any real hard feelings towards him. Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Hearing none. So we'll now go on to our next section, which was her imprisonment years. And actually, comrades, can I get you to read this section since you guys assisted with working on it?
Yep. Prison number 11710. Elizabeth Gurley Flynn spent 28 months in the Alderson Federal Women's Reformatory from 1954 to 1957. Elizabeth was also known as prisoner number 11710, now a heavyset, gray-haired elderly woman. In 1951, at the age of 61, Flynn was one of 132 second-tier party leaders indicted under the Smith Act for allegedly advocating the overthrow of the government by force and violence. She was found guilty and sentenced to 3 years imprisonment. Other women convicted along with her and sent to prison included Claudia Jones, a Trinidad-born journalist, feminist, Black nationalist, and member of the National Committee of the Communist Party, and Polish immigrant Betty Gannett, a teacher, writer, and national education director for the party. The Alderson Story, My Life as a Political Prisoner by Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. The narrative begins with Flynn's arrest at the hands of 3 FBI agents who stormed into her family's New York City apartment on a hot morning in June 1951. But the book is not about the excesses of Cold War anti-communism or the Smith Act. The trial and appeals process are addressed in 2 very short chapters, and by the beginning of chapter 3, we have arrived at Alderson, along with Flynn, Jones, and Gannett. The first federal women's prison in the United States, Alderson, was founded in West Virginia in 1927. It was intended to be a place of regulation and reform. By the time Flynn got to Alderson, the reformatory spirit had waned considerably. Confidence in the women, which had brought out the best and even the worst of them, was now replaced by distrust and suspicion, an atmosphere in which the inmate was always wrong. All forms of initiative were discouraged. Subjects covered in the Alderson Story. First, a strip search, followed by an enema and a search of all bodily cavities. Then a shower, after which the new inmates were handed a rayon nightgown and a brown housecoat of rough, nondescript material, photographed and fingerprinted, and quarantined for 3 days. Quote, no rich women were to be found in Alderson. The majority were Black and Spanish-speaking, many from abusive backgrounds, some mentally ill or suffering from drug addiction. Inmates and guards were racially segregated when the prison was founded, and the situation had not changed by the time Flynn arrived. Claudia Jones was assigned to a segregated colored cottage. After the Supreme Court declared segregation unconstitutional in its 1954 decision in Brown v. Board of Education, Flynn, Jones, and other communists were called upon by prison officials to help integrate the prison houses. Flynn clearly reveled in the irony of communists being asked to enforce a civil rights edict issued by an arm of the U.S. federal government. Flynn's solidarity with the oppressed and unwavering commitment to social, political, and economic justice reverberate throughout the pages of her prison memoir. Never one to waste an opportunity for activism, she used her time at Alderson to get to know the women around her, understand how and why they ended up in prison, and use this knowledge to advocate on their behalf. She presents fellow inmates as complex individuals whose crimes more often than not were the consequence of struggling with limited resources against forces beyond their control. Conclusion. Flynn's commitment to internationalism and the solidarity of workers around the globe was matched by a strong affinity for the country in which she was born. Like her friend and mentor James Connolly, she saw no contradiction between love and country and revolutionary working class politics. In a letter to her sister Kathy, days before her release from Alderson, she wrote, quote, nothing and nobody can take my country away from me. I sit in prison thinking of its beauty, its breadth, its people. It is ever in my heart, my thoughts, my eyes, its growth, its vastness, its richness. Sitting in the twilight, watching the sun sinking in the west, I remember my country clear out to the Pacific Ocean.
All right, thank you. So with that, we'll break for a round of questions and comments. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function and we'll get to you. So one question I had, and I saw it off the quotes, was she talked about her mentor and friend, James Connolly. Was there any indication that she knew Connolly a lot closer during that short time when he was in New York City, before he went back to Ireland to organize the Irish Republic?
Yeah, no, the way it was written was that it was more of a comparison between the two, that they both had the same sentiment. There was no indication that they had met or even knew each other. So the last 3 slides actually came from the I think it was People's World, the CPUSA article. And I gave the quote. I said in the last slide there where it came from. I could only put just so small amount of information. I'd encourage anybody that's really interested to definitely look into that article. It's a very, what do you call it, even-handed, article about Elizabeth, and it was written in 2020. So there you go.
Thank you. Yeah, because I know James Connolly was, I believe, involved a little bit with the IWW on the East Coast in the brief time he was here. So I was wondering if perhaps they may have run into each other. Comrades Maggie and Vinny?
I do believe in her autobiography, she did run into him quite a bit on the East Coast when she was very young and spoke with him and in similar areas, but I'm pretty sure that's who that is. And then he moved to Ireland or left America pretty early on before she got involved with them.
Thank you. All right. Comrade Sean, Georgia, you have the floor. Go ahead.
What was that a quote you cited about her and Connolly again?
So it was based off that article that had mentioned.
Yeah.
I can put the link. I will put there's the chat here. I'm going to link that article in the chat, or at least the hyperlink that had mentioned. Okay. Any other questions or comments about that section? And then for an example of one of the tenant talks, or at least what talking in the square would have been like, there's a short video I want to show everyone. And this is basically someone's delivering a speech that Elizabeth Gurley Flynn did in about 1906. And this would have been part of a debate that would have gone on in the square at the time. So
what is a labor victory? I maintain that it is a twofold thing. Workers must gain economic advantage, but they must also gain a revolutionary spirit. Yes! This is what they must do in order to achieve a complete victory. For workers to go back with a few cents more a day, a few minutes less a day, but the same psychology, the same attitude towards society, means is to have achieved a temporary victory, but not a lasting one. For workers to go back with a class-conscious spirit, with the organization and determination attitude towards society, means that even if they have no economic advantage, they have the possibility of gaining in the future. Workers gaining in the future. In other words, a labor victory must be economic and revolutionizing.
That's right.
Otherwise, it is not complete. Workers of the world, unite! Unite!
all right. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just am always surprised at how 100 years ago the differences in class consciousness between workers then 100 years ago and now, where even the average worker would be able to understand what she was talking about, whereas today if you try to talk about these topics, people will think that you were crazy. If we can get 1,000 people out for a labor strike in support, that would be, a celebratory victory. Whereas, for the Patterson Silk Workers strike, that was just an everyday occurrence. That's all.
Thank you. Secretary Emeritus Angelo, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Okay, on a social level, very interesting. When people came to find out what was going on politically in the early 1900s, they used to go to Union Square in New York. And they used to listen all day long, 7 days a week. There were people on soapboxes, actually crates, talking about social issues, yelling out to the crowd. Today, they would look like they're insane and they would be taken away to the nut house. But that was the common thing at the time. No internet, no in your own room, Googling things up. You went socially in a crowd and you listened to what the person was saying. And what they were saying was actually reverberating. My parents told me the stories. It reverberated around everything. Did you hear about so-and-so? Oh, she believes in free love. You know what that meant at the time? That meant you sleep with anybody you want, no commitment to the family structure, nuclear family, and things like that. So I just think on a social level, what a different world we're living in. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Angelo. I imagine also the cars these days would drown someone out.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that there are lots of books that Elizabeth Gurley Flynn has written. And even in her speeches, she's really quite direct. I think she's not only a good orator, but an excellent writer. So there's just a whole bunch of information. None of us got a chance to look at the whole broad spectrum there, but there's a lot written. And again, that article that put in the chat, it explains that she was beloved. I mean, they had, I guess in New York, they had some kind of memorial with her there, of course, and all the different people that attended that we read about and hear about, and they were there to honor her. So she had her own following. Obviously, she had more of an impact with the international area. Most of all, well, I guess a good portion of all of the books did quite well overseas, but they were obviously oppressed here. So even in that time frame, there was oppression on even her books. But you can get those books now. And one of the slides, I think, gave a snapshot of about 6 of her books. But I think you can go anywhere and see, I am definitely interested in some of her books now.
Thank you. And I know that at New Outlook Publishers, we do have Labor's own William Z. Foster, which Elizabeth Gurley Flynn wrote.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention along what you were saying. I think it's interesting that as we were going through Rebel Girl, a lot of the communist writings that I've read are not so personable, or not. They don't include so much about someone's personal life and their kind of character and their personality, and that's why we wanted to include a lot of that biographical information in that first section, is because I don't usually get that from the communist writers that we read. So I did think that was like a particularly interesting. You get a whole bunch of her life, a lot of flavor, and you learn a lot about just the kind of personality she had that was so good for speaking and organizing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so on the thumbnail of the class, I don't know if you want to show it, it featured the image of a historical marker that was in her birthplace of Concord, New Hampshire. Back in 2023, that sign was actually removed. There were protests, people in New Hampshire were saying that it was a violation of free speech. But the town decided that it was promoting communism, even though it really doesn't say anything about communism, simply because she had associations with the Soviet Union, i.e., she fled there after McCarthyism pushed her that way. So, yeah, I just wanted to state that, it's, our history is, constantly being erased.
Thank you, comrade. All right. Any other further questions or comments before we go to our wrap up?
Yeah, real quick, what a role model for women and women in the movement. So let's not belittle what she's done and what she stands for. Thank you.
For real. If you have the address of the Concord, New Hampshire Town Hall, then please let us know and we can forward our complaints there.
I just wanted to say there is also a lot of really interesting songs about the IWW that they put in a book that's called the Little Red Songbook.
New Outlook
I found a bunch
Publishers
of
is our
them.
sister
Phil Hill
publishing
did the
house,
Rebel Girl
and for an update
song,
from that, I will
and a
turn the
bunch of
floor
other
over to
people
Comrade.
had songs
You have the
about
floor,
them
sir.
too, and they're fascinating. So very
Thank
cool
you.
if you're interested.
And they're all on
Our
YouTube.
partner
Yeah.
publishing house, New
Thank
Outlook
you.
Publishers. You can find a lot of great works there, and they help support the school. And of course, like Comrade Nick mentioned earlier, we have one book written by Elizabeth Gurley Flynn currently, and that is Labor's Own William Z. Foster. We have a lot of great works, and they all go to help support the school, so check it out, newoutlookpublishers.store.
Thank you, Comrade. And we will close out with...
Thank you for watching this full-length class from the People's School for Marxist-Leninist Studies. For more information, or to join our free classes, visit our website, check out our YouTube, listen to our streams on Spotify, and chat with us on Reddit.